Okay, it's time for a little bit more Halloween themed video. Again with Sculpt Nouveau. This is another one of those things. My wife found this in one of the retail stores that sells all the Halloween kind of stuff, and she thought this would make an excellent Sculpt Nouveau type subject. So this is just a plain stamped metal Halloween thing, whatever. I think you're supposed to put a candle or something in here, and it has some clear inserts that I took out for the sake of this video. So she wanted it, and I agree that she wanted it to look like old iron or steel, so a nice rust finish all over the whole piece. So it should be fairly easy to do. Now for this piece, like our last video where I showed the primer going on first, I don't think we're going to need that. I'm going to double check here, but I think this from everything I can tell looks like this has already been painted, and it has a very matte feel to it, so I think this is going to take paint without any issue. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply our Iron B metal coating all over the surface to get our base color. And just as if you're unfamiliar with this process, overall it's fairly simple. Typically I apply the metal coating in 2 layers. I put the first coat all over everything, let that cure, and then I follow that up with a second coat. Now some pieces, if it's really detailed and you're worried about missing a spot, sometimes you might want to do 3 layers, but typically 2 is sufficient. Especially with this, with a black background color, if we were to miss a spot, you're not going to see that as like cheap plastic or something showing through. So we're going to put 1 layer on, let that dry. The second layer, while that's wet, that's where we're going to apply our patina. Now, even though this says green, this is Tiffany green patina. Over iron and steel, Tiffany green creates rust. So we're going to follow it up with that. And real important, the timing of this is what's really important here, is as soon as we put this Iron B all over our piece, or wherever we want the rust to appear, as soon as we put that on, while it's wet, that's when we're going to apply our green patina. And this will react and oxidize to form real rust. But for that to happen, the Iron B has to be wet. When the acrylic in the Iron B starts to dry out and seal in those iron particles, you get little to no reaction. So real important to get that reaction started and well on its way before the acrylic starts to seal it off. Once that's done, once we've got a patina that is to our liking, we can seal this with the Clear Guard matte. And Clear Guard matte is going to give us a good protective finish, but also not obscure that rust and make it look shiny or anything like that. So I really prefer the matte for any kind of heavily oxidized piece, like especially something that looks aged, because shiny rust just looks off. So without further ado, we're going to get started with our metal coating application. Now, real important with the Iron B to know that this needs to be shaken up really good before each use. If this sits for a while, the metal powder is very dense and will settle out, and you'll wind up just putting on gray colored acrylic all over your piece. So make sure you shake this up before each use. Now, as it comes, this is just going to be kind of a dark gray color, but that gray is all of the iron particles in there. Now, because I want this to be a really heavily aged iron looking, like rusted iron piece, what I'm going to do is brush this on and then stipple out the brush strokes to give a heavily textured surface. I want this to really have a lot of texture. The more texture you have with a piece like this, the more aggressive rust you get forming. You'll find if you just put this on like with an HVLP sprayer, you can still get a nice rust, but it's not near as aggressive as if you have a heavily textured surface. So first I'm just going to brush it on, and it's cool enough today that the dry time is going to be fairly slow. So I'm going to put this on and then come back and stipple that out. So just to give you an idea what that looks like. And I'm going to leave the interior just flat black, since once the inserts are put back in, this will just The inside will be black where the candle is. So once we get that painted on, we can come back and stipple like this. You could also use a sea sponge, or in a pinch, even a crumpled up paper towel. But the main objective here is to remove the brush strokes and also just give a lot of surface texture. But if you leave brush strokes, it's going to look like exactly what it is, like something that you brushed something all over. And again, the nice thing is this is an inexpensive metal coating, so if you have to apply it multiple times to get it just right, it's minimal expense to do that. Okay, you see one side done. That is the effect we're shooting for with this first layer. For the last step of the process, but so I can use that to move this around. But the key thing is here, I just want to make sure I stipple out any brush strokes or drips and get everything coated really well. I want rust all over everything, but if for some reason when you're putting this on, if you want rust to just be in certain areas, concentrated in some certain areas, then just put the metal coating there. This is the perfect kind of piece to do that because it already has a nice flat black look to it. So if we want, we could just put the metal coating in certain key areas that we want to be rusted. But again, here I want rust all over the piece. So once that's on, ready to let that dry, and then apply our second coat. And of course, our second coat is the one upon which we will apply the patina. Okay, we're ready for our second coat of Iron B metal coating. Our first coat has dried and we got a pretty good adhesion, and we're ready to proceed. So again, with this step, with this coat, it's really important that we apply our metal coating to everything we want it on and be ready immediately with the patina. Because again, if you wait too long to apply the patina, then you're going to get little to no reaction. And another thing about that reaction with your Iron B is to get a good oxide forming, we really want mild temperature and high humidity. The higher humidity we have, the better reaction we're going to have. So real important to remember that if you're in a really dry climate, like say you're in Arizona or Utah, really arid climates, you're going to get very little reaction. And in some cases, you might even have to use a humidifier to introduce more humidity into the air to get a good patina reaction. So be aware of that. If you're getting little to no reaction, it might be because it's too cold and too dry. So very much dependent upon the atmosphere in which you're working to get good effects like this. So I've got everything ready to go. I've got my metal coating B, and I've got my green patina off to the side here. So I'm going to apply this all over, same steps, brush it on everywhere, stipple out the brush strokes, and then apply our patina. And with these cheap brushes like this, a lot of times I just try to pull out any loose hairs that might be in there. But again, better brushes. This is obviously not that critical of a project, but investing in some good quality brushes is always a good idea. So ready to apply that. And I did it before I turned on the camera, but I'll do it again just for the sake of completion. Make sure that you shake up your metal coating before you do this, because if it sits for too long, that iron will start to settle out, and then you'll get very little reaction because you don't have enough iron for the patina to react with. And again, same deal as with the first coat. I'm just going to brush it on and then go back and stipple out those brush strokes. And you want this to be a fairly thick coat. You obviously don't want this just globbed on to where it's running and dripping, but I do like it to be a little on the thicker side. So I'm going to put that on, and then again, just go back and stipple out those brush strokes. And like I mentioned earlier, a sea sponge works really well for this too. I want some of that texture. This has some roof texture in there. I want to show up a little bit, but I really want a very aggressive rust. And putting this on fairly heavily and stippling this will really give us a lot more surface area for that metal, for the patina to react with the metal. And this particular metal coating, all of the metal coatings, the B metal coatings and the C metal coating, both work really well indoor and outdoor. We've got some customers, and I've got some pieces at my house that have been done and put outside for years now, and they hold up beautifully. And that's on both concrete statuary as well as metal parts like this. So this has an excellent lifespan inside and outside. In fact, I think we have an older blog entry on our page where I show some of the metal coating that was done that Ron did at the San Diego Zoo back in the early 90s, that we went and back and visited it, I think in 2017, and it was still looking good. And I apologize for the lighting in here. I've got a pretty good lighting setup. It looks good to me here in person and on my playback monitor, but someone had mentioned about my previous video seemed a little on the dark side. So in future, I may see about adding some more studio lights to this. Just out of view of my camera, some giant lights here. So if those aren't doing it, I can always add to the fun with some additional lights. So again, we're just applying this all over and going through and stippling it to remove any brush strokes. And real important here to make sure you move with purpose, get this all applied, because we're going to follow this up with the patina while this is wet. If we wait too long, it's going to lock in that iron and we're not going to get much, if any, reaction. So make sure that you get this applied and move on to the next part of the piece, because the longer you sit around putting this on, the more time it's going to have to dry out and the less reaction you get. So we're going to keep this moving. And the other thing to be aware of, as I mentioned earlier about dry climates, are going to speed up the dry time of the metal coating. But today in my workshop here, this is probably about 65 degrees, a little cooler than I would like, but actually perfect for this, just because this is going to give me a little bit more working time to make sure this isn't drying too fast. So cooler temperatures can be your friend, provided you have enough humidity to drive a reaction. And this again is one of the reasons I use these cheap brushes, because this absolutely trashes these brushes. I would not do this with an expensive brush. But again, that extra additional surface area really adds to the effect and gets us a nice aggressive rust. Okay, we're back around to the front side again. So one last little stipple around the edge. And again, I do have some areas that are a little thicker than I'd like, but for this, it's perfect, because that rust, the more aggressive the rust, the more realistic it looks. Okay, we're ready to apply our patina. And this is an acid patina, so always a good idea to make sure you wear a mask and have good ventilation in your work area. Okay, we've got our patina applied on everything, and I applied it pretty heavily, so we should start having a reaction occurring. I'm already seeing some spots here and there. And again, remember, like I've stated in previous videos, you don't want to just keep putting it on until you see a reaction, because if you put too much on, then you don't have enough oxygen for that reaction to take place. So make sure everything's covered and then back off and let nature do the rest. So we're at that point right now. Typically, you'll know your reaction is starting to occur in some areas where it'll start turning kind of a darker, sometimes kind of a reddish brown color. Sometimes in really humid weather, you'll see that occur pretty fast. But Here it's starting to discolor in a few areas, so it's time to back off and let that do its run its course. And this is probably going to take about probably 5 or 6 hours to really fully develop. And again, it's a little cooler today and drier, so we'll see how that reacts. And again, the beautiful thing about rust is if there's any areas that don't work the way we want them to, we can just come on top of that with more iron B, hit it with the patina again, and let it react again. All right, so it's a day later. I went ahead and let this sit overnight to get a good reaction. Again, a little drier here than I would like, but we have a good rust reaction. I would prefer, I was really hoping to get more of this all over, and a lot of that is because it's a very, very dry right now. So again, one of the easy fixes for that is we can just apply more, just stipple more iron bead just in the areas where we want more rust, and hit that with our green patina. Again, here I'm using the Tiffany green. Both the Tiffany green and the light green patina, both of those will get a really good rust reaction. The light green patina is actually the stronger of the two, so light green is really my preference on that, but either of those green patinas will result in rust on the iron B metal coating. But in this case, I showed this to my wife. She liked it and is all too happy with it as it is right now. So we're going to stop here and lock it in. And to do that, to lock in the color where we like it, we're using the Clear Guard, and I'm actually going to use the matte for this. Sorry, I had the wrong spray can. I'm going to use the matte for this to seal this in, and that way we don't have shiny rust, because if we put satin on this, we're going to get a kind of a funky shiny rust look, which just looks off. Now, I've actually been shaking this can on and off this morning, which is why I grabbed the wrong one. I've been walking around with the can that I've been shaking. The matte will initially make it almost look like the rust is disappearing, but once the matte dries out, once that solvent evaporates, that rust will come back. So remember that when you put this on initially, you may freak out a little bit thinking you've changed the patina, but as soon as those solvents evaporate off, you'll get your color back. So be aware of that. And again, when in doubt, this is why all of these techniques, I really recommend keeping a scrap piece of drywall, even cardboard, or just a scrap piece of wood around to run some tests on to get different finishes. And also that's a good way to check your environment that you're working in to see if you have enough humidity to get a good reaction. So always do that first. The metal coatings and patinas are really inexpensive, so there's no excuse not to do a test on a small piece before you do something high dollar or like this that is a one-off. But again, like I said, this is a very easy piece to correct, because since we're going for rusted metal, if for some reason we don't have enough rust, we just put more on and put more patina on and create more rust. So that said, I'm going to seal this using the Clear Guard matte. And remember, because it has that matting agent in it, you need to shake this up really well. If you just grab this off the shelf and go to town, it's basically going to be like spraying the satin all over, and you'll get a beautiful semi-gloss, but not a matte finish. So make sure you shake it up really good to get that matting agent suspended. Now this is also obviously a lacquer that is solvent based. And again, to preserve the little bit of cognitive skills I have left, I'm going to go ahead and put on my respirator. Okay, we have our finished piece sealed with Clear Guard, so we're ready to put this outside. If you want, with a piece like this, if you want to do what's called a living patina, you can not seal this at all and just let that rust or that oxide continue to spread. And rust is like cancer. So if left unchecked, it will spread. It will do exactly what rust loves to do, which is spread out all over the surface. So if you want that, again, that's sometimes referred to as a living patina, don't seal it, don't put a sealer on, just leave this outside and let it go. Now what I like to do, and I've done this in previous videos where we're faux finishing like foam props and things like that, is to really accent that, to sell that illusion that you're dealing with something made of old steel. What I'll do is sometimes take some of the silver B metal coating and dry brush that just in some key areas, like some of these edges like this, and it just makes it look like it's been handled a little bit and scuffed, and real like fresh steel is showing through. So for this particular piece, that's not really a look that I want with this. I just want it to look like old rusted steel or cast iron that's been sitting outside. But there we have it. There's our finished piece ready to go. And again, if we wanted this to be rustier, if we want to keep making a more aggressive rust, we can just add more of the iron B, stipple that on, spray on more of the green patina, and let that react. But as it is, we're going to leave it like this, and there you go. There is a basic rust patina using iron B metal coating and the Tiffany green patina, and then sealed with the ClearGuard matte. And at the end of this video, I'm going to link 2 of our other rust videos, so be sure to check those out if you're new to this process. And of course, I'll put all of the product information in the video description, so be sure to click on those links as well. We have a lot more resources also in the video library section of our website. And last but not least, if you haven't already, be sure to click the like button and of course subscribe so you're alerted when we create new content.